Hello and welcome to this video on the demand curve. So how much would you pay for the following items? A tube of toothpaste, a smartphone, an old vintage car, or perhaps a priceless bit of art? Well, the price that you would pay gives us an indication of your demand for that product. In this video, we're going to look at what is meant by the term demand, describe the law of demand, and distinguish between movements along the demand curve and shifts in the demand curve. So let's start off. In a free market, goods are allocated using the price mechanism. And what do we mean by that? We mean where buyers and sellers meet in a marketplace. And a marketplace could be a market, a shop, even on the internet or the stock exchange. And the interactions of buyers and sellers through agreeing a price to do a transaction is how many goods and services are allocated. Now, demand refers to the amount that consumers are willing and able to buy at any given price. So let's just think about that for the moment. Demand in economics is the amount consumers are willing and able to buy, how many things they're able to buy at a given price. So for example, if the price of a donut was 60 pence, I might buy 5. That's how many I'm willing and able to buy. But if the price was £1 per donut, I might be only willing and able to buy 3. And that would be my demand function for donuts. The demand curve is a graphical illustration that shows us that relationship, the relationship between the price of a product and how many of them people want to buy. Let's have a look at an example. Here we have a price of a chocolate bar and the different prices at which that chocolate bar could be priced. So the chocolate bar could be maybe 10p, or it could be 40p, or it could be 30p. And on the right hand side, we have the number of chocolate bars that people want to buy at each price, i.e. the level of demand. So what we can see is that when the price is relatively high at 40p, people would want to buy 40 chocolate bars. But when the price falls to 20p, it's now cheaper, we can see that there's an increase in demand. People would want to buy more now that the bars are cheaper, and so demand would increase to 120 bars. And so what we can do is plot this relationship between the price of the chocolate bar and how many people would want to buy. So if you remember correctly, when the price was 50p, people didn't want to buy any. At 40p, people were willing to buy 40 chocolate bars. At 20p, people were willing to buy 120 chocolate bars, and so on and so on. So what we have here is a series of points that illustrates the relationship between price and how many people want to buy. And if we do a line of best fit here and join the points together, et voila, we have what's known as a demand curve. So this line here shows us the relationship between price and how many we'd expect people to buy. So I might say, well, if the price is 45p, I could go across here and then read off the x-axis at the bottom and say that would correspond with people wanting to buy roughly 25 chocolate bars. If the price is slashed to 5p, I could read along here and find out that that would correspond with people wanting to buy about 180 chocolate bars. So what happens when the price of a chocolate bar is raised from 20p to 30p? Well, we can see that there is a movement along the demand curve. There has been a change in the amount demanded as a result of the change in price. We would move along the curve, and so we'd be able to find out the new level of demand. So at 20p, the level of demand would be here, and if the price increases, we can move along the demand curve and then read down to our x-axis and find out what would be the change in demand. So when price changes from 20p to 30p, there is a movement along the demand curve and a reduction in demand. So the law of demand states that there is an inverse relationship between quantity demanded and the price of a good or service. Ceteris paribus. And ceteris paribus is a term used in economics from Latin saying all other things being equal. If all that changes is the price, we would expect there to be an inverse relationship to the quantity that people want to buy. So what we can tell us is that it slopes downward from left to right. because as price falls, people are willing to buy more of a good. So we always draw a demand curve sloping down to the right. That's very important. And a way to remember that is that your demand curve goes down. D for demand and D for down. Start high and draw it down. Down, 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 down. Why is it downward sloping? Well, because of a concept in economics called diminishing marginal utility. So let's quickly look at this concept. The demand curve slopes downwards because of diminishing marginal utility. And here's an example. The first donut I eat, I enjoy a lot. So I'm willing to pay $1. It gives me $1 worth of enjoyment. The second donut I eat, I enjoy that as well, but maybe not quite so much as the first one, so I value it less than $1, maybe 80 cents. By the time I've eaten my third donut, I feel a bit sick, and I don't attribute as much value to it, maybe only 50 cents. So diminishing marginal utility is the idea that economic welfare, our enjoyment of consumption of each good or service, goes down, diminishes, from each extra unit that we consume. So for every extra donut I consume, my enjoyment is a little bit less. So what might lead to changes in demand? Well, if a price changes, there will be a movement along the demand curve. So the demand curve shows us if there's a change in price, what would be the change in the amount consumed. If the price goes up, we'd expect less. If the price goes down, we'd expect more. And that we can find out by moving along the demand curve and reading off the axes. However, well, as we said from 20p to 30p earlier, however, if anything else was to change, so not the price of the product, but anything else that was to change that would affect demand, then this is going to cause a shift in the demand curve. And let's look at that now. So here we have our previous example. We had our different prices of chocolate bars, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and at those prices, how many chocolate bars people would want, which gave us our demand curve. Now, we can see that if the price changes, we just move along this demand curve. But actually, what if something else was to change? What if not the price changed, but actually, let's say there was an increase in our income. We all got a lot richer. What do we think would happen to demand? Well, if the price of a chocolate bar was 20p, would we still demand only 120? Now we have an increase in our income. The chances are we would demand more than 120 because we're now richer. And it would apply for every single price. So what we have now, because our income has changed, is we would have a new demand curve. So here we can see as our income has gone up, we've actually started to demand more chocolate bars than we did previously. We've had an increase in demand. And how would we illustrate that graphically? Well, let's have a look. So here's our relationship again between price and output. And here is our existing old demand curve, which we're going to label D1. Now, what we said here is that if the price was 50p, then actually we would want to consume more than 0 chocolate bars. If the price was 40p, we'd want to consume more than 40 chocolate bars, and so on, and so on, and so on. So what we can see is actually we have a new demand curve here, a new relationship between price and quantity demanded that's come about by the change in income. Here, demand has shifted to the right. And we've labeled this demand curve D2. So the moral of the story is, whenever price changes, we move along the demand curve. When anything else changes that affects demand, it's going to cause a shift. It's going to cause a new relationship between price and demand. That's an important distinction, one I really want us to get on top of. So what might cause a shift in demand? Well, these might be factors that would cause us a shift in demand. A change in income, maybe a change in the price of other goods. So actually, if the price of petrol went down, maybe I'd be more willing to buy a car. Things like fashion, if it's very fashionable now, that might see a shift to the right in demand. Advertising, weather, and changes in the population, which we call demographics. Maybe as there's more young people, they might see an increase in demand for certain products. To take into a bit more detail, what might cause demand, the curve to shift to the right, an increase in demand? Well, an increase in income, successful advertising, maybe a fall in the price of what we call complementary goods. And by that we mean things that go well with our particular product. Things that go well with a particular product. For example, a fall in the price of tennis balls might lead to an increase in demand for tennis rackets. A rise in the price of substitutes might also lead to an increase in demand. So if the price of, let's say, dairy milk goes up, then we might see an increase in demand for soya milk. Also, if goods become more fashionable, we'd expect a shift to the right. The opposite would also apply. So in this video, we've looked at what is meant by demand, looked at the law of demand, and distinguished between movements along the demand curve and shifts in the demand curve. Well done, put your feet up.